Today, we're gonna make this. And by this I mean a do-it-yourself book stand. Two ways, not fancy and fancy. To get our feet wet and make sure we have everything dialed in though, we're gonna start with the not fancy first. This way we don't ruin more nice wood than necessary, which there'll be more on that later. To make the non-fancy version, we're going to use 5/8 inch thick common boards that will dimension to 6.5 inches wide at the table saw, and then cut to proper length at the miter saw. Setting the table saw blade to 32.5 degrees, we'll cut the acute miters, and then again at 25 degrees for the peak. A few weeks ago I posted a video showing how to make one of these bevel jigs. If you haven't made one yet, there's a link to the plans and the video in the description below. With softer wood like this, an easy way to avoid tear out is to add a sacrificial board at the end of the cut, like this one. Then we'll dry assemble and stare in despair at the horrible mockery we've made of tight-fitting miter joints. I should have mentioned earlier, this is a really good time to make dead sure our table saw is fine-tuned and adjusted. Otherwise, the most likely outcome is a slew of messed up attempts like this. By the way, if you have ever screwed up so much wood trying to make a project that you feel you're personally over-contributing to the deforestation crisis, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, followed by the bell icon. If you're already a subscriber, thank you. You the real MVP. After 4 attempts, we'll have a passable triangle. Before gluing everything up though, we'll finish the interior with 3 coats of shellac and 1 coat of paste wax. Because if we didn't do it now, it'd be almost impossible once assembled. Unless you have really tiny hands. That could work. The old painter's tape trick works great for gluing up these odd angles that otherwise would be very hard to clamp. Since these are end grain to end grade joints, we're going to reinforce them a little with 1/4 inch dowels. On this softer wood, we'll pre-drill our holes with a small countersink bit from both sides. I found this to be the best way to avoid tear out. I'll have full detailed plans available in the description that will provide dimensions for this project and show you how to make the dowel hole drilling jigs. Next, we'll add our dowels with copious amounts of glue, and after the glue has dried, come back and flush them up with a handsaw. The outside will finish the same as the inside, working up to 220 grit sandpaper, 3 coats of shellac, with light sanding and Scotch-Brite in between coats before a final coat of paste wax. That's it. We're done. Have a good day, folks. Now for the piece de resistance. The fancy book stand. When you make your fancy book stand, you can use whatever wood you want, but I opted to go for black walnut and maple for a really nice contrast. After planing though, we'll realize that this is in fact not walnut and was just sitting in a barn for so long and got so dirty that it looked like walnut. On the bright side, I discovered I have some really nice tiger maple on my hands. A few attempts of digging and dimensioning through our woodpile later, we'll find a really nice piece of figured walnut that will work well for the project. The dimensioning and cutting of the frame pieces for the fancy holder is almost identical to the plain one. The only difference is we're going to be extra diligent in keeping everything perfectly square and flat, even going so far as to plane our pieces dead square with a shooting board in between cuts. Since this is very hard wood, there isn't as much room for wiggle or for forcing a joint to be flat if our miters are a little off. Above all, the best thing we can do to ensure accuracy is mark our lines with a marking knife and cut to the lines by slowly whittling away material. Because, like we figured out in the basic model, if we try and dimension everything to final length first before cutting the bevels, we're probably going to mess up. After a test fit, we'll finish the inside again with shellac and paste wax, and here's why I love shellac though. Look how fast it dries in between coats. I mean, this alone makes it my favorite finish. Just the fact that I can apply multiple coats over a few hours instead of a few days. Give shellac a chance if you haven't. Glue up is much the same as the plain version, except after the glue is dried, we'll realize that despite our efforts, our miters are still less than perfect. But that's okay. Like Adam Savage is fond of saying, we just need to hide a few crimes. With walnut being much harder wood and less susceptible to tear out, we'll just use a very sharp brad point bit and drill through from one side to make our dowel holes. If you know a better way to drill these holes, let me know in the comments below. After slicing up our 1/4-inch brass rod, we'll chamfer the ends a little before using 2-part epoxy to glue the brass dowels into place. Since brass is pretty soft, it's very easy to remove the excess with a bandsaw or hacksaw and a hand file before sanding. This next step is what really sets the fancy version apart, a little drawer for holding reading glasses or pens or pencils or...
You can put your in there.
Oh.
Today we'll make ours out of some bird's eye maple we have in the shop. Dimensioning is much the same. We'll run our stock over the joiner and through the planer to grandmother's house we go, before resawing and planing to a 1/4-inch thick. The best way we can ensure our drawer measurements are dead accurate is not to measure at all. We'll mark our dimensions directly from our stock. Using double-sided tape, we'll stick our frame to our drawer front stock and mark the outline of the drawer front from the inside. Sticking the two pieces together with more double-sided tape lets us cut out two at once at the bandsaw. Taking them over to the belt sander, we'll work to our lines again, checking the fit along the way before doing the final fine-tuning with a block plane. This is a good time to point out that finely planed, pointed wood, and I know this might come as a shock, is sharp and totally has the ability to take a large chunk out of your thumb, so watch out for that. Once the faces are fitting in the frame snugly, we can use some offcuts to mark lines, giving us the exact dimensions we'll need for the base, sides, and inner face of the drawers. At this level of the build, we're always using a marking knife, and we're always working down to our lines instead of cutting at them. You can always take away material, you can't add it back. Well, I mean you can, but it looks janky, so try to avoid it. We'll double check everything with a dry fit, then finish the inside of the drawer before glue up. I opted to use a mix of wood glue for strength and CA glue for super fast curing, since these pieces would be very hard to clamp together while letting the wood glue dry. With the drawer fronts glued on and everything sliding well, we can finish the outside of the drawer and the outside of the frame. Then, we can officially declare this project a success before checking out the clipboard video in the top right of our screens.